Welcome back to DMV Sports Zone.
Chased down by Beal in the corner for three, gets fouled and hits.
Welcome to DC.
Well, they timed him out.
You know we're down at the USA Cup. You're taking it slightly, I'm taking it slightly. Now you don't act on you, we'll be right back. Well, we gon' be right here, we gon' be right here. We ain't going nowhere. Welcome to DC. DC, the home of Chuck Brown. Oh, you don't know the sound? Well, let me break it down.
What's up, DMV Sports Zone? This is Noah. Really excited to go into week 4 for the fantasy breakdown for the Baltimore Ravens as well as the Washington football team. It's going to be really interesting. It's really a tale of two teams. We saw what the Ravens are capable of, but we also saw what the Washington football team's lowest point in the entire season might be. Well, let's hope so. And before we get into it, again, all the fantasy knowledge and data I'm getting is from Sport AI. Sport AI is democratizing the fantasy football process, all in the power of a mobile app. So if you are interested in signing up for the newsletter as we launch our mobile app, more information will be in the bio. Without further ado, let's get started. So let's go with the positive first, because you saw Nati and everybody else rant about the Washington football team. I'm about to go on a rant myself. So let's start out with the Baltimore Ravens. First of all, who are they playing this upcoming week? A red-hot Denver Broncos team. You can argue they've had a pretty weak schedule so far, but Teddy Bridgewater and that Broncos defense is nothing to laugh at. For the first time in years, they are methodical and they're efficient. What does that mean for a Baltimore Ravens defense who has faced some very tough opponents this year? We're still confident here at Sport AI that they're still going to be a decent defense. Are they going to be a must start? That remains to be seen. Again, it really depends on the depth of your league as well as the scoring, but scoring is pretty uniform across all the platforms. The Baltimore Ravens is a defense that you better have on your roster because, again, it's very deceiving in how the defense hasn't performed. They played Kansas City, and you saw them against the Detroit Lions. They held them to 17 points. The sacks and the turnovers, though, in which a lot of the fantasy sports scored, isn't there yet, but you have to remember, there were so many injuries. There's almost 6 starters on the defense that have had either COVID issues or injury issues in this early season. And when they're back healthy, it's going to be a very, very good team. So you're going to want to stash the Baltimore Ravens. Again, I don't know if they're a must-start this week, but if they're on waivers and you have room to have 2 defenses, a lot of times people like to rotate depending on the matchup. Baltimore Ravens is a great second defense because you want to wait and see. That's a very similar situation I'm about to talk about with the Washington football team, but let's wrap things up with the Ravens. As predicted, the Baltimore Ravens running back room is to be avoided. We saw Taquan Williams, Latavius Murray. There's just too many names and too many opportunities in there to spread the ball. And on top of that, obviously you have Lamar Jackson. As predicted, the Ravens running backs aren't someone that you really want to pick up. If you have Taquan Williams right now or Latavius Murray, and you're in a 14 to 12 team league, you can stash them. And they could be waiting to see, but my recommendation is they're not going to be worthy of a start anytime soon. So barring an further injury to a running back for the Ravens, they're best to be avoided. However, Justin Tucker, man, Legatron, I personally think the greatest kicker of all time, is a must start. If you were lucky enough to draft him, good for you. He is going to be a kicker that can win you games for the rest of the season. And that Baltimore Ravens offense, really efficient, got in field goal range. You don't have to worry about him. He's a must start. Just let him sit there, and he'll just keep getting you points. Lamar Jackson is another, I think, matchup-proof quarterback that you can start, even in an 8 to 10 team league, because of his consistency. He'll get you the 20 points week after week after week. And you saw, even after he threw 2 interceptions in week 2, because of his rushing ability in PPR leagues, it doesn't affect him that much. So if you're lucky enough again to get Lamar Jackson, not a problem. Mark Andrews, though, on the Ravens is going to be someone, like I said, interesting to watch. As I said, he's a top 10 at minimum fantasy tight end, and he really proved me right. Getting over 100 yards, very efficient with his throws. Against the Denver Broncos secondary that's going to target and fill that box with a 9-man box to prevent the run, prevent Lamar Jackson coming out, and more importantly, Marquise Brown, Andrews will get open. If you have Andrews, he's a must-start again, and he will be a top 5 tight end season long. I know that might be a hot take for some people, but he's a reliable tight end in a position that's very weak. So Mark Andrews obviously must start, as well as Justin Tucker and Lamar. So no new players from the Ravens kind of stand out heading into week 4. And now that we got all the good news out of the way, it's time to talk about the Washington football team. This is going to be really tricky. Again, you cannot panic just yet. It is week 3. It was week 3, and the Buffalo Bills arguably have a top 3 offense in the league. Does that excuse the fact that the Washington football team defense gave up over 45 points? No, absolutely not. But the bright spots, Antonio Gibson with that long receiving touchdown, they're finally utilizing him like they said they would, like a McCaffrey. The touches are there, and like I said, he was a must-start, and he continues to be a must-start, and he'll improve as the season goes along. And like I said, McKissick, again, he's a hot and cold player, and you saw he was invisible in that blowout loss. Gibson continues to be a must-start, and I know Terry McLaurin didn't have a great game, but he's too talented to simply put on the bench. Unless you're in a 5-man league, 4-man league, there's no reason that you bench Terry McLaurin, especially heading into a vulnerable Falcons secondary. Him and Gibson should be able to feast. And Logan Thomas, you saw, did pretty well in the blowout loss. Again, if you have Logan Thomas, more than likely, as I predicted in the earlier season videos, he's probably your tight end 1, and he's just a sit and start type of player. You don't have to worry about switching him out. Again, because the tight end position is so weak, and Logan Thomas is getting the red zone targets that we predicted in the beginning of the season. The wild cards, obviously, the Washington football team defense. They were supposed to be a top 5 defense in real life, and in fantasy a top 10 at minimum, but they're not getting the turnovers, they're not getting the sacks, they're just simply not performing. Is it too early to give up on them, though? Absolutely. Especially against a terrible Falcons offense. This is going to be a big test. You got to see how they respond this season to adversity. The Washington football team really and truly, as Nati and a lot of other people have already iterated, is going to be the break or make moment for the Washington football team. From a fantasy perspective, who does it affect? Mainly the Washington football team defense. Because we know Gibson's going to be consistent, we know Scary Terry's going to be decent throughout the season, and we know Logan Thomas is going to be decent throughout the season. Taylor Heineke as well, despite the blowout loss, is a consistent quarterback performer. At this point, as I told 2 weeks ago, he's proven enough to be at least a stash in a quarterback 2 league. He's someone that you want to keep as depth, particularly as the season goes along. He's a great add on your bench, and if you're a quarterback 2 or a 2-man quarterback league, he'll be a great start against the Falcons, because the Falcons are terrible. You know, the Washington football team is terrible at this moment, but the Falcons are also terrible. So there's not a lot of concern there. This is mainly a rant about the Washington football team defense. They've let us down so far, frankly, and been extremely disappointing. This will be a make or break week. If they can't perform against the Falcons, safe to say, I don't know if they're worth stashing. Might be a cold take as the season goes along, but with a fantasy football season, you can't take that much time to see a proving defense. So I would stash the defense. I don't know if I would start them, because yes, it's a juicy matchup against the Falcons, but why risk it? Why risk it on a defense that's consistently failed, as opposed to the Ravens defense that's trending up? So at this point, in a weird sense, the Washington football team and the Baltimore Ravens defense are both in the same place, but the momentum is towards the Ravens. Both of them coming into the season, a lot of people thought they're going to be a top 10 defense. Both of them have struggled relatively out of the gate, and both at this point are a stash. But for the Washington football team defense, it's more of a prove-it time. For the Ravens, the schedule gets easier from here. So all in all, Ravens really trending the right direction. A lot of good players, particularly not necessarily the biggest superstars like a Marquise Brown. Tucker is definitely going to be, was drafted. Andrews was the guy that's going to get drafted. Lamar Jackson too. So I'm just reiterating what everybody already knows. Washington football team as well. You got the Scary Terry. You have the Antonio Gibson. But interestingly enough, you have Taylor Heineke now. That's a guy worth picking up. And you also have Dustin Hopkins, who's a consistent kicker. Guy you can really pick up depending on the matchup. And then the must wait for one last week will be the Washington football team defense. Again, this is Noah. Hope you're liking the fantasy football predictions, recap, explanations week to week. And I'm really happy to see that there's a lot of good players coming out, a lot of questions as well. And I will be very excited for next week when we talk about week 5. Again, more information about Sport A in the bio and DMV Sports Zone Nation. Have a great day. Thank you.